Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we're talking about January 6th. It's Insurrection Day. Happy Insurrection Day, my friends. I know that you're not alone out there celebrating because many people out there in the media and in the political world are, of course, doing this. And it's very irritating to me. Now, I'm not somebody who thinks that what happened on January 6th was excusable or something that should be commended or really even joked about. But when the other side gets so far into, I would say, the left field, it becomes necessary to call them out and rub their noses in the hyperbole and the exaggeration that they are laying upon our feet every single day. So we're going to get into a lot of that. We've got two different speeches that we're going to break down a little bit in depth today. We've got Joe Biden came out and gave a 27-minute speech. Before he spoke, Kamala Harris, the vice president, came out and spoke for about 9 minutes. And so the theme of these two all day long was all about this attack on democracy, assault on American democracy. And so we've got a lot to break down. We need to decide, well, what does that term really mean? I mean, if they're going to be castigating not only Donald Trump, but anybody else out there who supported Donald Trump or anybody else out there who is even remotely in the umbrella, in the wingspan of Donald Trump's campaign, if they're going to try to tar and feather all of those individuals, they better be very specific about what type of conduct they're so upset about. And so we're going to be asking some pretty interesting questions about that. We're also going to be introducing the January 6th Hyperbole Tracker, because as we're going through these speeches, we got to make sure we're keeping tabs about what these people are talking about. And we're going to put them into a nice little chart called the Hyperbole Tracker just to see whether or not January 6th really was as bad as the Civil War. And spoiler alert, it was significantly worse, as we're going to discover in this show today. So we've got a lot there. Big question about whether Liz Cheney is actually scripting what the White House is talking about. Of course, she's running the January 6th Select Committee, more or less. And a lot of the language that she used showed up today in Joe Biden's speech. And so we'll have to break that down. And then, of course, we will turn our attention over to Kamala Harris, who is, the historic vice president, who's really changing the way that the vice presidency works or doesn't work. So we're going to take a look at all of that and more. If you want to be a part of the show, place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where they're chatting away. What's up, Black Cat Meow? We've got B-Spec, Jeremy Matrita's in the house, and others are chatting away. There's also a form that looks like this, and that was the next slide. This is the form. It looks like this, and this is what will give me your questions, and then I'll be able to do my very best to send them to you. Radicy is saying there's no mind map about January 6th. I think I have one. I don't know where it is. I have to find it, Radicy. That's over on Locals. And I think I figured out the YouTube plugin so you can see that I can pull some stuff up on the screen. Like, so for example, Remy King says, hello. What's up, Remy Kings? So I can see that. Daisy Frog says, hyperbole. So that's pretty neat. So we'll be playing around with that as well. And without any further ado then, my friends, let's get into it. President Joe Biden came out today, January 6th, very solemn anniversary of a horrific day in American history. The Capitol building, a very sacred place, was commandeered. It was attacked or assaulted or whatever you want to call it. We're going to break this down, and we're going to hear exactly how they define it, and then we're going to compare and contrast their definitions against their own record. And so we're going to go through this in depth. I know it's a lot of Joe Biden and a lot of Kamala Harris, but it's going to be worth it. And so let's take a look at how this started. Joe Biden got an extra pep of whatever they give him in the mornings, an extra booster shot in the old rear end or a cattle prod or whatever they use to him to get him going. And he came out today and he really delivered a ringer. Here's how it sounded.
State the obvious. 1 year ago today, in this sacred place, democracy was attacked. Simply attacked.
All right, so let's start at the top, shall we? Democracy was attacked. Okay, we've been hearing this for a year. I'm getting pretty tired of it. I'd like to hear exactly what they mean by that, because we've got a bunch of different options here. And we've got a bunch of different people being prosecuted. And we have what is intending to be sort of an event, in my opinion, being extrapolated out to be used for something that it is not. And so we got to ask ourselves very clearly, what the heck are they talking about? If they say that this was really an attack on democracy, well, we have to really detail what that specific conduct was, don't we? Because if we're going to be castigating somebody or impeaching somebody or prohibiting somebody from running for office again, or if we're going to be trying to tar and feather an entire political party, we got to get clear on what they are upset about. On January 6th, what happened? What conduct is problematic for them? Let's brainstorm. Well, how about physical attacks on police officers? Physical attacks on police officers is certainly problematic. Is that why they're upset? Is that an attack on democracy? Well, I don't think so, because there's attacks on police officers all the time, and they're not too upset about most of them. How about police killed in attacks? Is that why they're upset? Well, police are killed in attacks pretty regularly, and we don't hear a bunch of hemming and hawing from Joe Biden. How about civilians killed in attacks? Could it be that? Well, I mean, the U.S. government took out a bunch of Iraqis, civilians. Nobody really hemmed and hawed about that. We had physical attacks on police officers all over the summer. We're going to review those. Joe Biden wasn't really upset about those. How about property damage? Is it that there was a lot of damage, physical property damage? $30 million we hear is the number. Well, there's property damage all over the summer of 2020. There's property damage from Antifa and BLM all over the place. So it can't be that, right? Property damage alone is not an attack on democracy. A physical attack on a police officer, not alone, is an attack on democracy. What else could it be? Well, could it be it was the Capitol building? Because it took place at the Capitol building versus other buildings? Maybe that's why. Maybe that's what Joe Biden and Kamala are so upset about. It was the Capitol building, not the other buildings. But that really doesn't make any sense either, because other federal buildings got torched. We knew that they were throwing Molotov cocktails over the federal courthouse. So how are they defining this? Well, maybe it's not necessarily about the building. Maybe it's about the conduct that was interfered with. Was the transfer not completed? In the Capitol building case, did the so-called insurrectionists get out there and stop the actual transfer of power from happening? No, they didn't. It happened. So that can't be it either, right? That's not an attack on democracy, because the transfer was in fact completed. So was it that an external force attempted to seize power then? Could it be that there was the Oath Keepers or the Trump MAGA insurrectionist force, whatever, that they wanted to go in and seize power? Did that happen? Did anybody take control of the country? No, it didn't. So it can't be that either. So then really, what are we talking about? I mean, what else is there? It must have been something about the interference with the actual counting of the votes. Because there's all sorts of different things that you can do to deal with this stuff, right? If a civilian is killed in an attack, then you charge them with a crime. If there's property damage, you give them a disorderly conduct or a criminal trespass plus the property damage. Criminal damage is a charge. And then you charge them and gather restitution. There's all sorts of things that we can ask ourselves about what this means. And the reason why this is important is because we have to ask ourselves, what is our justice system for? And what are we trying to get out of this? And I mean that, like, as a bipartisan question. Like, what does the country want out of this whole thing? Justice? Okay, what does that look like? Does that mean that the people who were there get prosecuted and penalized? Because I think that's happening, right? That's happening. Is it that you don't want people to forget about it? Because I think that's what the Democrats are doing. Is it that you really don't want Donald Trump to run again? Well, that's called the political process, and you get to vote for that the next time he votes or decides to run, yes or no. So we can see here, it's kind of hard to define. And when you have this big, broad, general umbrella term, attack on democracy, it can mean anything. And that's why we have problems with that phrase, or any type of conduct that is not defined. It can be whatever you want it to be. And democracy has this big golden concept behind it. And it can mean big, beautiful rainbows if you want it to. Joe Biden carries on with this. And listen to what he says about this attack.
The will of the people was under assault. The Constitution, our Constitution, faced the gravest of threats.
What?
Outnumbered in the face of a brutal attack, the Capitol Police the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, the National Guard, and other brave law enforcement officials saved the rule of law. Our democracy held. We, the people, endured.
All right, so, all right, this is going to be an interesting show. So he comes out and he is very, very presidential. And so he starts telling us about the enduring strength of the men and women who were there in the building when all of this was going down. So we have our hyperbole tracker. Now, we're going to be seeing a lot of these allegations that January 6th is analogous to the Civil War, to Pearl Harbor, to 9/11. And so as we go throughout the show today, we're going to have to be spending some time to fill this chart out to see. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I'm not real sure that 1/6 is as bad as the Civil War, but by the time we get through the show today, I'm not real sure. I'm not sure. We'll see. Okay, so we start with Joe Biden. They endured at a time of crisis. So we take a look at the first element here, the time of the disputed area, the time that the opposing entity was in charge of the disputed area. Let's take a look if we can piece this together. How long were these insurrectionists in control of the U.S. government? You can see here, Wikipedia tells us that the first window was entered into at 2:11 p.m. And then we can fast forward throughout the horrendous day until around 5:40 p.m. when the entire interior of the Capitol is cleared by rioters. Okay, so from 2:11 to about 5:40 p.m., we'll say that's about 3.5 hours. And that 3.5 hours we can go ahead and put on our chart. And we just, oh, hey, look, this works. Thank you for that. That's Elizabeth Hope 4. Super chat, just figured out my technology. Thanks for thanks for helping me test that. Elizabeth Hope 4. And thanks for the donation. Okay, so we get the 4 hours. We're going to round up here. We're very generous to this chart. And you can see we can just go ahead and plot the total amount of time that the insurrectionists were in the Capitol building, about 4 hours. Okay, then they got thrown out of there. Now, if you compare and contrast that to 9/11, what I'm really doing is I'm sort of rounding these down dramatically. So let's say the time that the hijackers were in control of anything, we'll say that's about 24 hours, right? We'll round it up. The entire air fleet was grounded that day to 24 hours. Now, you could say it's much longer than that because that entire area of New York was just taken over. You know, I mean, really was sort of out of control. Pearl Harbor, I gave the same status, so 24 hours. And then the Civil War, of course, a lot of disputed area. So about, 4 years or so there. Now, you might be taking a look at this chart on January 6th and saying, Rob, that's only 4 hours. That's insignificant relative to the Civil War. Oh, but I digress. I disagree with that. And so remember what we're trying to do here. What's worse, the Civil War or January 6th? We don't know. So we're trying to compare and contrast. And you might be saying, Rob, like the Civil War is 4 years of like massive carnage. January 6th was 4 hours. But January 6th was all of that carnage compressed in 4 hours. So think about that. That's why it's even more catastrophic. So it's like, it's more violence per hour ROI than the Civil War is how I'm thinking about it. So just do the math and it'll make sense. Okay, so Joe Biden's speech continues. Here's what he says.
For the first time in our history, a president had not just lost an election, he tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the Capitol.
Peaceful transfer of power.
But they failed. They failed. And on this day of remembrance, we must make sure that such attack never happens again.
All right. So they failed. They were trying to interfere with democracy. Sarah Tremper says, thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. You can also see that we have a copy of the original impeachment, the impeachment resolution, which went out into the House of Representatives. And so we're trying to figure out what happened here. What was preventing the peaceful transfer? So if we're trying to define what democracy is and what the attack on democracy is, sounds like it was kind of the interference with the moving of the votes. But then we get Joe Biden now. He's saying he's preventing the peaceful transfer of power. Oh, all right. So how did Donald Trump do that? So we know what part of this whole day was so problematic. I mean, it can't be the property damage. It can't be the assault on the police, because we know that happened all throughout 2020 and they didn't care a whit about any of that. So that can't be it. So it must be something else, right? It must be the interference with the counting of the votes and the preventing of the peaceful transfer. Got it. All right. So how did Donald Trump do this? We spent a lot of time on the channel talking about it. And you can see they talked about very specific language, right? Number one is that he kept reiterating false claims. You know, we won this by a landslide, blah, blah, blah. So you can say that that is kind of, election talk. Remember Trump said, grab him by the what, and then that was sort of locker room talk. So we're going to put this into sort of two buckets. We're going to talk about election talk and we're going to talk about fighting talk, right? Fighting words, because they're also upset about that. They're upset that he said we won by a landslide. They're also upset that he said during that speech that if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, right? Those are signed off on by Nancy Pelosi and Cheryl Johnson. So we've got all that there. We know exactly what they're talking about and what they're upset about. And this is excellent because we can pinpoint this stuff and we can add it to our hyperbole chart. I mean, I think that it might be hyperbolic, but we're not decided yet. We haven't filled the chart out, but we're going to. So we know that from the impeachment document, they're really upset about the fighting language. Now, there's also the election language, but I kind of got rid of that. I think that's just part of politics, right? Everybody who loses complains about losing. Donald Trump did it loudly because he was the president. And so here, used fighting language. Well, we know that that's what they're alleging happened on January 6th, so we can give that a green checkbox here. And I'm going to just guess that there was fighting language used everywhere else. I mean, we know on 9/11 there was a lot of fighting language. I mean, when they were trying to commandeer the cockpits, obviously people were fighting over that. Pearl Harbor, fighting language, certainly, I would say right in the probably immediate aftermath of the attack in Civil War. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of fighting language. So we're on track. I mean, we have a high ROI of violence to hour ratio, and we also have fighting language on January 6th. So it's not looking good, folks. Let's listen back with what Joe Biden has to say.
We shall know the truth. Well, here is the God's truth about January 6, 2021. Close your eyes.
Close them.
Go back to that day.
Go back.
What do you see? Rioters rampaging, waving for the first time inside this Capitol Confederate flag that symbolized the cause to destroy America, to rip us apart. Even during the Civil War, that never, ever happened.
What?
But it happened here.
Oh, my gosh. There were Confederate flags in the Capitol building on January 6th, and that didn't happen during the Civil War? I had no idea. So we got to update the chart. Here it is. And you can see, folks, this is one that goes in favor of the 1-6 column. Uh-oh. We have Confederate flags in the Capitol on 1-6, but to my knowledge, that didn't happen on 9/11, on Pearl Harbor, or on the Civil War, as Joe Biden just confirmed for us. So this is not looking good. I mean, look, this is going to be problematic. If we get more green check marks in this column, then that means this might be worse than the Civil War and 9/11. Might be worse than both of them combined. I'm not sure. We're going to have to figure this out. Joe Biden continues on with his speech. Let's see what he says.
Of police officers. A crowd that professes their love for law enforcement assaulted those police officers, dragged them, sprayed them, stomped on them. Okay,
so I'm not joking about that, right? What we saw there was really problematic, and I said that back on January 6th, that violence was not something that was a good thing. I wasn't encouraging that. I was saying that the people who committed the violence should be prosecuted, and that there should be equal justice applied across the board. And I was doubtful that was going to happen. And unfortunately, I've been proven right about that. And so Joe Biden is onto something, though. There was an assault of the police. We saw that pretty consistently throughout history. I would say that also happened during the Civil War, during Pearl Harbor, during 9/11, during 1-6. I'd say assaulting police is pretty consistent. And so we're looking pretty clear, right? We've got violence, we've got fighting language, we've got 3 hours of time in disputed language, we've got Confederate flags flying all over the place, even when they didn't exist in the Civil War in the Capitol building. So this is looking bad, folks. Let's check back in with Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney, of course, is leading this very serious business, January 6th Select Committee, getting to the root of the case here, making sure that this is non-political, non-partisan, just got to get down to the facts, so that she can go out there and, fight for American justice or whatever. But we had a prior video on this channel about this woman. She was back on George Stephanopoulos' show on January 2nd, hitting the new year strong, coming out and talking about her new key eyewitness testimony, the person who was going to crack this whole case open. And she's communicating about what Donald Trump was doing right in the immediate aftermath of January 6th. She was communicating what was so problematic about Donald Trump's speech, or about his actions. Why was he so negligent? There was an interference with the votes. There was somebody who was doing something problematic. Who was it? It was Trump. What was he doing? This.
The committee has firsthand testimony now that he was sitting in the dining room next to the Oval Office watching the attack on television as the assault on the Capitol occurred. We know, as you know well, that the briefing room at the White House is just a mere few steps from the Oval Office. The president could have at any moment walked those very few steps into the briefing room, gone on live television, and told his supporters who were assaulting the Capitol to stop. He could have told them to stand down. He could.
Okay, so great. So as we're going to see, he actually did do that, but he didn't do it out of the Oval Office. He did it out of the Rose Garden. But she's upset that he didn't go into the Oval Office. But the whole point of this, did you hear what she said? We have a key eyewitness who's going to come and testify that Donald Trump was in the dining room. That fat pig over there was just sitting there watching Fox News, watching all this happening, eating his Diet Coke, cramming his McDonald's down his gullet, and just laughing, yucking it up, texting Sean Hannity with a cigar in his mouth going, America that, right? That, you think that's really going? So that's what she's implying is happening. Now, very curious language from her, almost verbatim. That's what Joe Biden says in his speech today. Listen.
What did we not see? We didn't see a former president who had just rallied the mob to attack, sitting in the private dining room off the Oval Office in the White House, watching it all on television and doing nothing for hours as police were assaulted, lives at risk.
Same thing. She might as well just be his speechwriter. I mean, it's exactly what she said. So you can see exactly why this committee is looked at like a joke, right? It's not a bipartisan thing at all. It's clearly ultra partisan. Liz Cheney, a supposed Republican who's not going to be a Republican as of next year, I'm guessing, is in charge of this thing. And her talking points are showing up in the president's speech. So you can see what this means. Now, this is what they're talking about. And this is what they're so upset about. The Oval Office is right here, and the dining room is over here, directly connected to the Oval Office. President's secretary is right here, and he can step right out of the Oval Office and go into the Rose Garden. And guess what? That's what Trump did, as you can see. It's time to go home, and he did that right about the same time that Joe Biden, as president-elect, made a speech. Joe Biden came out at 4:05, made a speech. Donald Trump uploaded his video at 4:17. And Biden just barely beat him to the punch. Now, this is about the time that everybody was responding. Okay, Army Secretary just got to D.C. Metro headquarters. Vice President Pence just phoned Christopher Miller saying Capitol not secure. We see that all of this is happening right in real time. General Hawkinson, right before 3:55, has a phone call. McCarthy leaves the Pentagon. 4:18, after Trump uploads his video, Secretary Miller then discusses the availability of the National Guard, and nobody even shows up until much later. First contingent of National Guard members get there at 5:50, after everybody has already been cleared. Everybody's already cleared at 5:40, I'm sorry. Around the time that it's cleared, Congress then at that point says, not even a big deal. We'll be there. We'll be back there, and we're going to count the votes back at that time. So we can see from 2:11, that's when they break the first window. And I see somebody saying here, let me find this. Somebody was saying, Rob, it just went by. I apologize. Somebody said, Rob, you're manipulating the timeline of the events. There's a lot more that happened way before this, okay, before they actually broke in. And there's a lot more that allegedly happened after this, right, after they left. But they counted the votes by 8 p.m. that night. They were counting votes that night by 8 o'clock. So, okay. So let's take a look at the Hyperbole Tracker. The big complaint here from Liz Cheney and from Joe Biden, Donald Trump was in the dining room, which is a huge problem, obviously, as you can tell. I mean, they're basically trying to, I don't know how much money they're spending on this select committee, but we've got the president of the United States screaming about this to the entire nation today. So obviously it's a big deal. So Donald Trump used another White House room. So we'll just put that category in there. Using other White House rooms. You can see here, Donald Trump did it. And you know what probably happened? I'm going to guess that they probably, Abraham Lincoln, I'm guessing he probably used other rooms too. Probably the other presidents as well. I would just guess. I'm not sure. I mean, I can't prove that. I mean, they have the Lincoln bedroom. Maybe it didn't always used to be called that. And he took it over. So it's complicated. Here's Joe Biden now asking us a very good question. You know, we saw a lot of violence. This is something I hear a lot about. Rob, it was really violent, though. Yeah, I know. I was. I don't condone the violence. I've condemned it consistently. I don't want violence. I have to live in the same society as everybody else. I want a functioning government. I don't want a non-functioning government. But when one side takes advantage of an argument and they blow it out of proportion, when you see an actual terrorist attack like 9/11 happen, you see what happens as a consequence of the government going in there to take control and say, we're going to solve all these problems moving forward. It's bad precedent. And that is exactly what's happening here. We talked about this yesterday. They're going after Sebastian Gorka's cell phone records for him and his entire family. He's a talk show guy. Sean Hannity, same thing, for sending text messages back and forth. You want a fake select committee made up of entirely partisan individuals to be able to send government subpoenas to your cell phone provider, your internet provider, your building manager, whatever, to go get access to your data. What happens when that is somebody who is not on your side? That is a scary thought. And there are people who are just doing cartwheels all over the country every time Liz Cheney opens her mouth. It's a sick thing that's happening, but it is happening. Now, Joe Biden is asking us about this. January 6th was so violent. We're not going to accept this as a norm. Here's his speech.
We must decide, what kind of nation are we going to be? Are we going to be a nation that accepts political violence as a norm?
It's a good question, Joe. Are we going to be a political nation that accepts political violence as a norm? Good question. Great question, because I have that question for your administration. Let's rewind the clock back a couple of years. And yeah, this is whataboutism, but this is their standards, okay? Joe Biden has been in charge largely of covering the criminal justice system for the last 30 years. Every time you go back and take a look at anything that took place in the justice system, Joe Biden has his hands all over it. 1984, 84, 86, 88, 94 crime bills that just sort of, ruined the entire criminal justice system. We're still dealing with the consequences for that. I've made the argument that everything that you saw that happened to George Floyd is a result of Joe Biden's dirty hands all over the justice system. And so if he's going to come out now, and Kamala Harris, who used to be a prosecutor, who used to make fun of people begging for water in prisons and jails, if these two people are going to come out here and bark at us about law and order, I'm going to ask them about their record, just how it's going to be. They don't get to come out here and just selectively pick what they decide is a very important criminal justice issue because it serves them politically. It's not how this works. They can attempt to do that, but I'm going to call them out. And if anybody wants to say it's whataboutism or whatever, that's fine. It's their record, not mine, right? It's theirs. I'm not saying that Joe Biden should be accountable for Hillary Clinton's record. It's his record. He's been in office for 37 years. So same thing with Kamala Harris. So it's their record that we're holding them accountable to. Sophia Narwitz back 2 years ago, May 2020, posted this on Twitter and said, police flee. Chaos, utter chaos, terrifying moment. thought I would be hit. Now, this was from a scene right after the aftermath of the George Floyd death in Minneapolis, and pay very close attention to this date, May 28, 2020. 3rd Precinct, and watch these police scatter out of here. How often did you see this plastered all over the mainstream media? Did any of the Democrats hold, any memorials or, pontificate all over the place when this happened?
What's up? They're gone.
All right, so you get the gist of it, right? That was on May 28th. 2020. Went on, that entire police precinct got burnt to the ground. Guy who was involved in that got, I think, convicted, going to prison for some period of time. But did you notice that there was a whole group of people attacking police officers, and the police were on their way, leaving there in an emergency because there was a crowd that had breached the perimeter and was torching the entire building? Highly problematic. Now, violent, I disavow that violence, just like I disavow all violence, right? I don't condone this at all. But did you see any of these police officers who were involved in this showing up on Don Lemon's show on CNN about 5-6 times? Did you see that happen? I didn't see it. Did you see them showing up on The View? I didn't see that either. Did you see any of these people being held in solitary confinement, or do we know their names? Have they been plastered all over the media, all over the place? Do we have a memorial for May 28th, 2020? No, we don't. We had an entire summer of this. But because it wasn't the Capitol building, and because this is a politically favored group that was behind a lot of this violence, namely BLM and Antifa, 2 organizations that are on the side of the left, they're favored. And so this gets papered over. Nobody talks about this. And so that's the double standard. And in fact, it's even worse than a double standard, because a couple days after that happened, on May 28th, after those fiery but peaceful protesters burned that entire police precinct to the ground, Kamala Harris posted this on Twitter. May 28, 29, fast forward, we've got June 1st. She sees the wreckage, the chaos that is happening out there in Minnesota, and she says, if you're able to chip in now to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota. Okay, and at this time, she's a senator. She's running for office. So this is a very expedient political issue for her. She is now going to be able to use this, Secure Act Blue, donate to the Minnesota Freedom Fund. Okay, so she's raising funds on the back of this. And so she's now in this administration, the same administration that's going to preach to everybody about criminal justice, while she's literally raising funds to get people who were arrested and charged with crimes as a result of that lawlessness out of custody. Interesting. Yeah, so it's their policies, right? It's not, well, your side did this. It's literally, they have 2 different takes. Politically favored group, no consequences. We'll raise funds to get them out of jail. Politically disfavored group, we're going to make this a national tragedy indefinitely, and we're going to use it to our political advantage at every turn. So we've got Joe Biden here now. Another big reason for this speech is this type of language. This type of language, I think, is very useful to this administration because they don't have much else to talk about. Here's what he said.
only when it's convenient. You can't be patriotic when you embrace and enable lies. Those who stormed this Capitol, and those who instigated and incited, and those who called on them to do so, held a dagger at the throat of America, at American democracy. They didn't come here out of patriotism or principle. They came here in rage, not in service of America, but rather in service of one man.
All right, so you can see that, right? Joe Biden's coming out here. He's doing the rah-rah thing in service of democracy. We're hearing all a lot of this language. It's pretty standard stuff. And so, a big reason why they're out making much ado about this, of course, and not only is it a politically useful tool, they're going to be using this select committee to go and try to sideline Trump through a legislative resolution that would preclude him from running again. They're going to use this to continually rally their base. Just think about it like red meat on either side. It's like on the right, the Republican leaders are always talking about reining in big tech, right? They don't actually mean it. It's nothing consequential is going to come of it, but they dangle that over there on the right, like, yeah, stop big tech in all their emails. Okay, so it's a ridiculous thing that's happening, but it's the same thing that's happening over there. Even when you listen to Liz Cheney, when she's on George Stephanopoulos' show, and they're asking her about criminal charges for Donald Trump, is this going to be a criminal negligence there charge, Liz Cheney? And she's like, well, you got to ask Benny Thompson about that. But what I'm really focused on there, George, is dereliction of duty, and we can deal with that through the legislative process. So you can see. So Joe Biden has really no achievements to talk about. Afghanistan was a disaster. Foreign policy, Build Back Better is dead on arrival. Border is a disaster. Economic issues are, continually problematic. The stock market's going down. You see supply chain issues all over the place. Gas prices at record highs. There's a lot of problems going on for this administration. Meanwhile, nobody can find tests anywhere they look. And he's supposed to stop the virus. Got it. So you take a look at these poll numbers and you can see why they would want to talk about this so much. Nate Silver over at 538 says, an updating calculation on the president's approval rating. 51% disapprove, 42% approve, and you can see it's sort of trending down over here. Not looking good. You can see this is a smattering of other polls. We got Rasmussen showing consistent trends across the board. Morning Consult, YouGov, Rasmussen Reports, Polls, Suffolk University, and these are relatively recent. I mean, the latest from January 3rd to the 5th. Approve 43, disapprove 53. And so they have nothing reasonable to talk about. So this is it. This is what we get. You can see how this relates to other people. Donald Trump looks like was a little bit lower consistently. You can see how he relates to Clinton. He's dropping below Clinton, same time in the term, well below Obama, same time in the term. Bush, well below Reagan, well below basically everybody except Trump. Let's see. Little bit over Gerald Ford. Of course, he's coming off the Nixon era. Ronald Reagan's higher. So, yeah, I mean, historically pretty bad. So it's a nice way to change the argument. It's a nice way to shift gears and make this all about something that your side is going to get really agitated about. And even many independents, right? Many people, we've talked to people yesterday on the show. Hey, I'm right down the middle, and it's really hard for me to see this but anything but a violent attack on democracy. And that's a fair point. That's why this is such a powerful issue. And they're going to continue to use it. Pause quickly for a Sarah Tremper. Thank you for that super chat there, Sarah. Says, what about the White House cop, the woman officer holding the side door open for people? Yeah, we covered that on one show. I can't remember what show it was, but there was, I think BuzzFeed did this. BuzzFeed actually assembled the video surveillance footage from the opposite side of the Capitol. And we talked about this. There was an officer who walked in, tapped another officer on the shoulder, whispered in his ear, and they just opened. They just stood aside, and all of the protesters just waltzed right in. And there was no violence at all. There was nothing angry about that at all. It's very interesting, very strange. And of course, you don't see that replayed all over the media time and time again. Here's Joe Biden. He carries on.
We're living at an inflection point in history, both at home and abroad. We're engaged anew in a struggle between democracy and autocracy, between the aspirations of the many and the greed of the few. between the people's right of self-determination and the self-seeking autocrat. From China to Russia and beyond.
China.
They're betting that democracy's days are numbered.
Well.
They've actually told me democracy is too slow.
It is.
Too bogged down by division.
By people like you.
To succeed in today's rapidly changing, complicated world. And they're betting. They're betting America will become more like them.
Yep.
And less like us.
Yep. Well, guess what there, China Joe? It's going that direction, and it's largely thanks to you. You know, we're seeing this comparison that the United States is so different than China. And I woke up in 2022, and it's a different country than it was in 2020. Dramatically. We've talked largely about this. Let's do a little compare and contrast between China and the United States. Well, right now, we've got two countries that have lifetime bureaucrats. So Joe Biden has been a part of the Democratic Party from 1969 to present. Xi Jinping has been there since 1974. So actually, Joe Biden has a little bit of seniority on him. The ruling party here in the United States is the Republican and the Democrat uniparty. Nothing has changed basically my whole life. I mean, everything's mostly the same. Everything is still broken. Over there, it's the Chinese Communist Party, which is, basically the same thing, more or less. We have in the United States, we have a little bit more free speech. In China, they're completely party control. They can just sort of eliminate you. Ours has a couple of additional fail-safes in there. So our free speech is sort of the censorship has been outsourced to private companies that are still basically controlled through the tech conglomerates and through the woke sort of culture that exists. And it all seeks to limit people. I mean, we have, people who were involved in, very, very, very important medical advancements who were banned from Twitter, banned from YouTube. Rand Paul has been banned from YouTube. So he's going over to Rumble. So, okay. Yeah. I mean, we don't have a party like the Democrats don't control our free speech per se, but I mean, they kind of do because they limit a lot of the conversations that take place. So, all right. So it's not really that different at all, Joe, and your party's the party that's behind it. How about property rights? China, of course, completely controlled by the party, the Communist Party in the United States. Up until recently, it was mostly free, but now we have the CDC that can just kind of step in there, or did step in there until the CDC gave them the old backhand. So pretty similar there. We've got media over in China, totally party controlled. Here, it's corporate tech controlled. New York Times is basically run by, a family. It's supposed to be the purveyor of truth. It's like run by like a guy who owns it. Okay. So it's corporate and tech controlled. He's, part of the same cocktail parties as the other tech owners are. And so it's a corporate tech controlled sort of mainstream media. In China, it's just one party. China, though, it's communist. And so they take a full 45% out of your income. It's more or less the effective tax rate. Here in the United States, though, it's 35%. So, if you're sort of in mid six figures, if you want to be in that income, which most people I think are sort of striving to be in that income, you're looking at 35%. So in communist China, yeah, taxes are a little bit higher, but we're on our way there. And then, of course, the philosophy here, as is in China, is just gigantic federal control, massive centralized bureaucracies. We've seen this on this channel. We've talked a lot about this. Federal encroachment. The U.S. federal government wants to go in and be involved in every single local issue everywhere you turn. Here's just a smattering of the issues we've talked about. Schools and masking. Well, Dr. Miguel Cardona out of the Department of Treasury was going to go in there and step on that issue. He's not a local education person. He's with the feds. CDC with evictions. OSHA with the mandates. Same thing with the executive branch, using OSHA for both public and private mandates. We've got the Department of Justice has been sticking their nose in local election rules, gun laws, reproductive issues, and educational decisions all over the place. So it's sort of like that same uniparty is just, right in charge of everything. Not far off from China. So Joe's trying to stop us from being like China. I think we're well on our way. He continues now. Now, this was something that was very, very sneaky. Remember that a lot of people say that, a bunch of officers died as a result of January 6th. We're going to talk about officers that did die after January 6th. But Joe Biden calls two officers out by name. Brian Sicknick and Officer Billy Evans. Here's what he said in his speech today.
On it. Some have already made the ultimate sacrifice in this sacred effort. Jill and I have mourned police officers in this Capitol Rotunda not once but twice in the wake of January 6th. Once to honor Officer Brian Sicknick, who lost his life the day after the attack, and a second time to honor Officer Billy Evans, who lost his life defending this Capitol as well. We think about the others who lost their lives and were injured, and everyone living with the trauma of that day. From those.
All right, so you heard what he said, two names, Brian Sicknick and Billy Evans. They mourned them. Joe Biden and his wife Jill went to the Capitol Rotunda and they had to mourn these two officers who died as a result of what happened that day. Did you hear him say that? Okay, let's take a quick look because we covered this in depth. Officer Brian Sicknick died of natural causes. He was not killed as a result of what happened at the Capitol. Now, these news articles are just really, really shameful because they're trying to sort of say that he died, after defending the Capitol attack, like his role there was a part of the cause of his death. He died of natural causes after defending the Capitol. I mean, technically it's true because the day before he did actually do that, right? He was there protecting the Capitol. But here, let's take a look here. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick died of natural causes a day after defending the Capitol. Sicknick was previously believed to have died from injuries sustained during the riot, but not anymore, because the D.C. Medical Examiner's Office announced Monday, back on April 20th, that he died from strokes. Medical examiners said in a report citing, quote, acute brainstem and cerebellar infarcts due to acute basilar arterial thrombosis. In an interview, that medical examiner, somebody named Francisco Diaz, said Sicknick suffered 2 strokes at the base of his brainstem caused by a clot in an artery. At approximately 2:20 p.m., Sicknick was sprayed with a chemical substance. Remember that bear spray? Was that what killed him? Did that bear spray get into his bloodstream and it caused this stroke and the next day something happened and so you could tie that back to this? What's the medical examiner say? Says no. Despite being sprayed with the chemical substance, Sicknick's manner of death was determined to be natural, the medical examiner's office said. In the interview with the Post, Diaz said the autopsy found no evidence of internal or external injuries or of an allergic reaction to the chemical, but did say all that transpired played a role in his condition, right? Like life. Quote, the natural classification is used when a disease alone causes death. If a death is hastened by injury, the manner of death is not considered natural. Okay, so he died by natural causes. Yes, he's a hero for protecting the Capitol and doing the work that he did that day. But we can't just make up things in these conversations. And Joe Biden is doing that. He's trying to conflate this man's death with a political cause. And that's disgusting. The other name that he used was Billy Evans, another officer who died, unfortunately. Rest in peace. My hearts go out to these people's families. Billy Evans, he is another Capitol police officer who was killed. And he was killed during a Capitol attack. But it wasn't the Capitol attack that took place in January. It was the one that took place in April. He died on April 2nd, 2021. While guarding the U.S. Capitol, critically injured by a vehicle ramming the attack. A lone assailant was shot and killed by his fellow officers. Evans later died at a hospital with blunt force head injuries. He was the 6th Capitol police officer to die in the line of duty since the force was created in 1828. But you didn't hear much about that. Why? Because the attack wasn't a white MAGA insurrectionist. It was Noah Green. A 25-year-old black nationalist killed Capitol police officer, wounded a second. As a result of the attack, the Capitol was locked down. Green was shot, later died at the hospital. He shared extremist viewpoints advanced by the Nation of Islam prior to committing the attack at the Capitol. Officer Billy Evans was posted at a checkpoint. Capitol was on lockdown immediately after the attack. And so Joe Biden comes out here in a speech to America remembering what happened on January 6th, and he talks about losing 2 officers and mourning their death related to the tragedy on this day. Brian Sicknick died of natural causes. Billy Evans died several months later in April. It's very dishonest what he did there. Kamala Harris is no better. Let's take a look at some questions over from you at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Pull some of these up, and then we're going to get to Kamala Harris. See if there's any thoughts on this one. Kenny1B says, up yours, as Russell flies up his fighter jet up the A of the alien spaceship on Insurrection Day. It's Independence Day memes. I love that. No one you know says, hey, Rob, I'm not sure this question will fit with your comments tonight, but I saw Cheney's photo in response to the thumbnail, so I thought I'll go ahead and answer this. Comment, and the question here is, why is there so much negative output from Liz Cheney regarding the Republicans? Does anyone know why she has come off the rails so much? I recall her father as VP, and other than the media portrayal of him, I think he was not that bad. What caused her to drift so far from the Republican Party? It's a great question from no one you know. You know, I think it's a good question indeed. I think that the Liz Cheney saga she's sort of the pit bull for the Republican establishment, right? The Cheneys, the McConnells, the Bushes. There's that contingent of the Republican Party that used to run things. You know, Mitch McConnell was in charge for a long time there. George Bush was in charge for a long time there. He was supposed to be handing the chain of power over to Jeb, Guac Bush, and that didn't work out so well. And so that contingent of the Republican Party does not want Donald Trump back at all, because he threatens their existence. The good old boys club, the old fat Republicans feeding off the trough for a while, and then the old fat Democrats coming in there and gobbling theirs up, and that back and forth, it got messed up by Donald Trump. And that's why the Republicans were just as happy that he's gone as the Democrats. So I think that is a very good question. We have another one from Kareem165 on YouTube, says, making more out of 106 than it really is reminds me of attempting to make 1022 the Canadian version of 9/11. Does 1022 even ring a bell to you, Rob? No, sorry about that. It doesn't. But if I Google it real fast, it will. 1 second. What happened here? They banned the assault rifle. Look, even if I plug it into Google, doesn't even tell me what it is. So it's not just me. Canadian 1022 or Canadian, maybe I should put the date in there. Even Google doesn't know what it is. What happened in Canada on 1022? Maybe that is what I should type. What happened in Canada on 1022? Let's see if Google finds this. Yeah, Canadian attack was terrorism. Environmental group. All right, so I'll have to take a look at that, but now I have it queued up. Thanks for that, Kareem. No, I'm sorry, I don't know what it is. Hopefully that doesn't offend anybody. Let's see what else we've got. E. Dantes is here, says, I know you have heard of Ray Epps. Do you know anything about him that you can talk about with your faithful audience? If not, can we look forward to a deeper dive on Mr. Epps? We certainly can. In fact, while we're here, why don't we just go ahead. Should we take a look at it? So let me give you just a quick overview of the mind map. The mind map is available down in the description below for Ray Epps. So if you want to go poke around there, you can. Let's take a quick look at this while we're on the topic. Here is the Ray Epps mind map. And so I also believe that I have a January 6th mind map. I'm gonna create an index of all the mind maps that I've been working on. A lot of them are just not public yet because they're not done. But I can start releasing them and then continue to work on them. So yeah, this is Ray Epps. Ray Epps is a very interesting fella because we can see here Thomas Massey actually specifically asked Merrick Garland about this guy. Merrick Garland gave the old hem and haw answer, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about those guys. But what's very interesting about this guy, long story short, is he showed up on the FBI most wanted list. You can see him here as person number 16 down here in the bottom left, photograph number 16. Where'd that photograph come from? Came from this photograph. This photograph is directly from the first breach at the Capitol on that west end. This is the very first moment when they broke through the gates. This guy, Ray Epps, is there. And so the FBI saw this because he was out there for a long time encouraging people to break through the gates. There's video of him from the night before having this conversation with Tim Gionnet, another Baked Alaska streamer. He's there the night before encouraging everybody to break into the Capitol. You got to go into the Capitol, inside, break through the barriers. And so he's an instigator, and he was there during the very first breach. He broke them through the gates. And then something very interesting happened. People are getting arrested all over the place. So the FBI comes out. You go to their FBI.gov website, /wanted/Capitol violence, You see a couple interesting things here. A person in photograph number 18 got arrested. Number 17 arrested. Number 12 arrested. Number 15 still wanted. But number 16 has been removed. Just not there. Ray Epps has not been arrested or prosecuted to anybody's knowledge. As of August 17th, his photograph is still in this list somewhere. Where is that? So I think the FBI still has his picture in here. Right there. You can see it's right there in this montage, right there in the middle. He's there, but there's no active cases. You can go, you can look him up. There's no active cases. And they know who this guy is. I mean, the internet has found him, right? He's got a military background. He's been identified. They identified all of the other Capitol rioters, right? There's huge lists of people that they've identified. So everybody knows who he is, just like the other people. But no criminal charges. And he was instigating the whole thing. I mean, like the first breach point was orchestrated arguably by that guy. Attorney General Merrick Garland was asked about it. Didn't say much. Let's see what else we have here. That was from Edon Test. There is going to be more on Ray Epps. I'm going to do a full mind map on that at some point. But I got to beef it out a little bit more. There's a lot more to that story. Vientikis is here, says, Happy Insurrection Day. Let's all take a moment of silence in remembrance of how aliens descended upon the earth, brought Hitler back from the grave, turned him into a cyborg, sent him into the past to train all the dinosaurs, to bring them to the present day, to rain down death, destruction, and despair on all the people of the world. And their benevolent giving politicians in an event, true and utter horror, leading to a world where gremlins now exist and crime has been invented and something, Orange Man. Yeah, it's that chain of causation there, Vientikis. And that's a deep chain there. That goes all the way back till aliens and Hitler. So that's a complicated one. But yeah, I mean, Donald Trump said a couple things. An event was set in motion. Ipso facto, Donald Trump is Hitler. That's the argument. Nikki Dragon says, both are equally bad. My stomach is still turning. Happens every time I hear these people speak. Neither needs more airtime. And I think what he's responding to is the poll. The poll form is also down in the description. The worst January 6th speech. Who has the worst one? Is it Biden or Kamala? You can make your voice heard. We also have another question from... It's Jake from Oxford, the smartest man in the world. He's here. Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor from Oxford, is here. All right. He says, hey, buddy, you dumb peasant. Happy anniversary of literally the worst day in our history. I had this message for you last week, but it seems today is just as relevant. I see you have been very busy with the trials going on. Ghislaine Maxwell was set up and did nothing wrong at all. Changed my mind. So I decided with a little bit of my free time, I would take a reminder of the best year in the U.S. history. Yeah, because Jake's in charge. So it was the best year. He says, so here are some stories from the amazing job that our administration has done. Oh boy, here we go. Jake Sullivan, NSA, is going to give the highlights of the Biden administration. He says, Pete Buttigieg and his husband has hired me as their nanny to their beautiful baby. He, her, and they. So get that right. If you're talking about Pete Buttigieg's child, use the proper pronouns. Pete has also been teaching me everything that is racist besides just roads. Spoiler, everything is. Congratulations, you're a racist, and you're a racist, and what you're wearing is racist, and that food in your mouth is racist. Because everything is racist. And this is, look, folks, I'm not making this up. This is from Jake Sullivan, okay? He's very smart. January 6 traitors, he says, are literally lost in the justice system to never see the light of day, which is just great news for them. Well, except for that one FBI agent. Jake says, the Afghanistan pullout was the highlight of my career. Did you see how many people wanted to get on my flights? They were literally hanging off the planes. They couldn't wait to get over here. We're about to send federal aid to Lori Lightfoot out of Chicago. She was doing a great job, but ran short of cops, so we're going to go ahead and assist. And do I even need to bring up how fantastic our FBI is doing? They're all over everything, including those pesky parents, the real criminals. Well, Jake Sullivan's in charge. And he's just doing a great job, and he's very communicative. You can see very smart. First of all, I never thought about it, but it is very useful to have a political system where you can just throw people into the gutter, like Dantes in the Count of Monte Cristo. Yeah, but that's deep literature. And I haven't read that deep literature. That's what you learn about in Oxford. Dang it, he's so smart, man. I'm so grateful that he's here to just, this IQ of this entire group just got boosted by 35 points. We're very fortunate. Monster One says, today we mourn all the losses of the long-term BLM and Antifa insurrection. We must solemnly bow our heads in remembrance of the dozens of people who were killed, people like David Dorn, who was killed protecting his community. We must remember the billions of dollars in property damage that irreversibly affected many good Americans. We must remember the hundreds of federal and local government buildings like the Portland Courthouse and the police district in Minneapolis. We must remember all this violence was committed by people who openly expressed their intent to destroy the country, the Constitution, and everything America stands for. Signed by Monster One. Very good point, right? There was a lot of that. And their sort of statement, right, was an overthrow of America. And I think they're a little bit more organized. They have a website. Not sure that the Trump insurrectionists do. Monster One says, remember, it's only an attack on democracy when the right does it. When the left openly tries to overthrow the government, it's to protect democracy. Double standards all day. Oh, Jake's back from Oxford says, yesterday, you asked what the committee was so upset about over January 6th. To answer this, you need to first go back to the Maxwell trial, of course. The evidence that was the House manual, the one that explains the servants are not allowed to look them in the eye or speak directly to them. Same applies here. The servants just walked in, probably unbathed, definitely unvaccinated, and they touched everything. Think about it. Would you want all those bums touching your desk, using your bathroom, touching your torpedoes? This is why Miss Cheney is so upset, and I am in agreement with her. Well, that's a good point there, Jake. And, think about that. The remotes, the batteries might be worn out. Who knows? Monster One says, Pearl Harbor, 2,063 deaths. 9/11, 3,000 deaths. Capitol riot, 0 deaths caused by rioters. Anyone who compares these is an absolute evil person and the scum of the earth. Well, but did you see my chart, though? All those green checkboxes, though. So your argument, therefore, is invalid because I have a PowerPoint slide. C. Rose says, LMAO, Rob, what a tragedy. There were Confederate flags in the Capitol on January 6th. How could this possibly be? The Democrats need to save America again, as they always do. Well, we should probably just give them more unfettered power and access. I mean, they're already going after conservative journalists to get access to their entire family's phone records. So that's a good start. Maybe we should just give them access to ours too, just to make sure that we're not insurrectionists and we secretly don't know that. So, it's sort of like an attack in New York on 9/11 was an attack on America, and the entire U.S. government mustered its authority to go out and wage a 20-year war and spend trillions of dollars and really return home with nothing. They're doing that right now domestically. It's happening right now. This is what this is all about. And it's going to continue. And we're going to fast forward 20 years from now, and everybody's going to go, oh, yeah, like the same thing that's happening with Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Everybody's going, oh, yeah, kind of a good call what those guys were doing. Same thing here. Moose in the House just read an AP article that has the following statement related to January 6th and those who were arrested. Quote, several have been charged with terrorism over alleged actions related to J6 and the U.S. Capitol. Article title, Probe, Seattle cops improperly faked right-wing radio talk about misinformation effort by Seattle police that created false radio chatter that they were marching to confront other protesters. Question, has any of the 661 persons with crimes related been charged with terrorism? Is the simple crime of terrorism? Is the AP misinforming the American public in this article? Well, you can just go to the Justice Department, Capitol Hill cases. Let's take a look. So if you go over here, you can actually go right to this website. And here you'll see that all of the cases, we talked about this yesterday on the show, it's USAO-DC-Capitol breach cases. And so you can see every single case, right? This is a big, long, basically Excel spreadsheet that somebody's maintaining and uploading. We copied and pasted this yesterday. This is the entire document. And so if we do a Control F and we type terror, 0. Terrorism, 0, insurrection, nothing there. Let's see. So like conspiracy, it can be a lot of those, right? Conspiracy, obstruction, dangerous weapon, grounds. And you can see entering a galley, like they're all trespassing charges. Vital entry, trespass, assaulting. Those are going to be the most serious ones. So yeah, you can take a look at everything. Civil disorder, no terrorism, no, the B word. None of the words are in there. Go take a look. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And you can also take a look and see if there's like a Ray Epps, for example, like Ray Epps. Nope, no Epps in there. EP, nope, no Epps in there. But like if I wanted to go and see, you know, okay, like if somebody named Robert was here, yep, there you go. Balsaleros, Bauer, Chapman, got it, right? So it works, but you just don't get to see what's going on there. So very, very interesting stuff. Moose in the house. So yeah, I think that the AP article is misinforming the American public. Sounds about right. Monster One says, how stupid do they think people are? They really think people are convinced the most armed people in the world tried to overthrow democracy but left their guns at home? Hey, Jethro, pack your bags. We're going to go take over the government. All right, Earl, let me grab the ARs. Dang government, we don't need no gosh darn guns. Call Grandma. She got them little American flags. He'll tell her to bring the Confederate flag. That'll show him. And you just grab that podium too. That's from Monster One. That's a pretty good Southern writing there. All I had to do was read that. English Dave says, hey, Rob, how is olive oil doing these days? Let's take a look at this. You know, I can't ever click these links here because I got to be very careful about what. Oh, you son of a gun. All right, here's what he linked up. He said, how's olive oil doing? What was I doing right there? Was I smoking a cigar in that image? Thank you there for that, English Dave. I do love my spinach. We have Vientikus says, this whole idea of whataboutism is garbage, and it is yet again putting a new name onto an old concept. It's called juxtaposition, and it's important to compare and contrast things to see what has value and what has been gained. Good call. Sergeant Bob says, wonder how police recruiting is going in mini no place. Thanks for covering this. Biden and Harris, both embarrassments. By comparison, January 6th was a non-event. Good job, Sleepy Joe, on reading from your teleprompter. And he kind of was doing the marble mouth there for a while, too. He got boosted up with something. I don't know what it was, but it matters. History Matters comes from Three Girlies. Says, History Matters. This is a super long one. It's all right. We got time. It says, what a way to divide our country more than poking the Trump bear. I feel the same way about that. Completely ignorant and hyperbolic and divisive. Joe has been in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. Kamala has served in the Senate. Ignorant to history. Both need to go consult Cleo's history book. 1915, a nutcase brings in 3 sticks of dynamite into the Capitol. Senate doors were locked, so he bombs the reception area. 1954, Puerto Rican nationals shoot up the House of Representatives chamber. 5 representatives were wounded. Jimmy Carter pardoned them. 1971, bombing by the Weather Underground on federal buildings, to include both the Pentagon and the Senate, and several draft locations in a protest to the Vietnam War. 1983, bomb is placed outside the Senate, carried out by the armed resistance movement over protest of Grenada and Lebanon. Bill Clinton pardoned them. 1995, Oklahoma City bombing of a federal building. Let's not forget all the federal courthouses that were being attacked the last couple of years. Either they are extremely ignorant or completely pathetic or pathological liars. It's the latter. It's the latter. They're just, they know what they're doing. They're doing it intentionally. J6 does not hold any candle to all the other incidents at the Capitol or other federal buildings, but it takes old people to remind everyone that we need to put in perspective our true history. It's a very good comment there, Three Girlies. And so, of course, you know, it's about being political. You know, it's not about processing this case and moving on. That's the last thing they want to do. So they're going to constantly try to make this one stand out from the others. Very good comment. Leafy Bug says, why would a Confederate flag be in the Capitol during the Civil War? That would seem kind of counterproductive given the Confederates explicitly rejected the authority contained in that building by, you know, seceding and stuff. But what would I know? Biden clearly has all the facts, knowledge, and wisdom at his fingertips. I mean, I think he's saying like they didn't even capture it. You know, like back in the Civil War, even the South didn't capture the Capitol building, and these insurrectionists captured it. And they took that podium out of there. And you know what that means? They almost controlled the government. I mean, that's the implication. That's what he's saying. It's ridiculous. Okay, a couple more. We got to get to Kamala. Monster One says, so Trump says fight, and it's an insurrection causing speech. Funny how that when they want to leave out the rest of it, where he told the people to peacefully cheer on Congress. What about when Pelosi said there should be uprisings in the street? What about when Schumer led a mob on the Supreme Court and threatened them to the point that Chief Justice Roberts had to adjourn and admonish him? What about the Kavanaugh hearings? Trump's inauguration. Number of times the Democrats have done worse things is endless. People need to wake up and pay attention. Yeah, it's a one-sided binocular. You're only seeing half the story. Thunder7 says the Dems tried to impeach Trump twice, failed. There was nothing there. Just hate and Trump derangement syndrome, which is a mental disorder. Over 1 million people showed up on January 6th, mainly Christians praying and supporting the Constitution. Some acted violently, but nothing like Antifa BLM thugs who burned and looted and killed during the Summer of Love. The hypocrisy of Biden and the Dems is outrageous. The only people who fall for this J6 bull are the lunatic left, who are nothing more than commies. Nobody supports the Marxist Dems. It's a good comment, Thunder7. Another one, Monster1, says, I'm 100% being serious when I say this. Anyone who thinks this was a threat should immediately lose the right to vote. Nobody in the building was an actual threat. If they did, there would have been hundreds of dead rioters and not just one. An actual threat would be swiftly met with lethal force. An actual threat would have used lethal force. That's from Monster1. Also says, anyone interested in good content, go check out Blair White's new video about Jack Murphy. When a person who was so bad at being a man, they turned into a woman. All right, Blair White, Jack Murphy is a whole saga going on. It's a wild story. C. Rose says, Rob, how did you watch all this garbage? It's a good question, C. Rose, and thanks for noticing. It was a long day, man. Look how tired I look. I look like I aged 25 years. I had to listen to it. And when you have to clip it, you have to listen to it multiple times. I had to listen to Kamala a lot. We're not even there yet. Ugh, it's going to be a lot. Thanks for noticing. Kincaid says, greetings, Rob. Insight can be found from nearly all sources. However, a strong, valid argument for challenging controversy, one-sided declarations, frenzied minions, and crafted deontological justice have never been this nation's tradition. Some are pushing for perverted Marxism. I say be pragmatic, and follow up with Durkheim. I don't know who Durkheim is, but I'll have to look that up. Vientica says, another super chat. Hey, Rob, regarding your efforts yesterday, I'm more impressed when people pronounce my name correctly than not. Reese. I'm a Youper from Michigan. And Kareem says, making more out of 106 than it really is reminds me of attempting to make 1022, the Canadian version of that. So I think we got that one. And then I missed the other one from Reese. And Mark Hannon is here. Mark Hannon with a super chat and a donation. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. I'm getting used to this new tech. John Frazier says the Whiskey Rebellion, 1791, was an insurrection. January 1st was not. That's from John Frazier. Thank you for that, John. We have Dr. Frizoid says, since there is a presidential age minimum, should there also be an age maximum? Yeah, I think that maybe would be a good... I think the public should be able to tell. Like, what happened this last time? I could tell. We were all watching Joe Biden going, this is not good. But apparently a lot of people just were okay with that. But I think it was certainly concerning. Kareem also says, October 22, 2014 was when the Canadian Parliament was attacked by a shooter. The shooter and a 24-year-old soldier died that day. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with that. Thank you for that. Attacked by a shooter. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had your own little insurrection over there. I wonder if you're going to be reorganizing your entire government for that, like ours is trying to do. So those were some super chats over from YouTube. I think I might have missed Reese. Elizabeth Hope with the donation. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think we got them all. All right, so thank you, everybody, for that. And let's keep going over with some of the questions from locals. Then we'll check in with Kamala. Leafy Bug says, Biden takes another dump on the grave of Brian by politicizing his death. Despite Sicknick's request not to politicize his death, he's doing it. Did they say that? That makes it significantly worse. Kincaid said the last year and a half felt like a crap woke version of V for Vendetta. Great movie. Fair point. Ghost Gunner says, to be fair, I highly doubt Joe remembers anything about the incident or when the second officer died. He's still, I think, in 2020 time, to be fair to him. Vienticus says, look, Rob, we all know that everyone that ever died throughout history died on January 6th, and Biden had to go mourn them except for Hitler. He's still running around like a cyborg. Sounds like a bad movie. Grouchy Old Cat Lady says, those cops killed at J6 sounds like someone dying from COVID after testing positive after they are hit by a car. Right. It's not actually the same. Billy Evans died at a later event, a later attack on the Capitol. Still tragic. Still, can mourn his loss, but it's not the same thing. Thunder7 says, where's all the video of the Antifa thugs changing into MAGA gear? One of them recorded himself being fake when they released 10,000 hours of video. Maybe we'll have some answers to some of this stuff. Maybe we will. Tony Blinken from Harvard. Oh my gosh, this is Anthony Blinken here. Secretary of State says, sit down, Jake Oxford. I'm the smartest guy here, so I should do the talking. Oh man, we got a couple of Ivy Leagues over there. Sergeant Bob says, just like Jedgar Hoover's witch hunt of communists in the 1920s. There's precedent for this. You know, we're going through the Federalist Papers every morning on this channel at 6 a.m. And they're arguing about the same things we're arguing about 300 years ago. So, you know, none of this is new. Very, very much history repeating itself. And this is a sad story. Kincaid says, is this a trick question? I mean, do we pick the worst by who lied or the best by who failed? I'm going to go with Carlin and pick neither. Monster One says, anyone interested in Marjorie Taylor Greene? She was on Timcast last night. Said the goal of all of this is disqualification of political candidates. Said they intend to disqualify people like Trump and herself, Holly, etc., from being able to hold office. Yeah, it's a political consolidation of power. They can't do it legally, but they can do it politically using the media. They can do it legislatively using the legislature and different resolutions. They can... Who knows where it goes. English Dave says, the Popeye picture is from an earlier stream in which you were doing an impression of someone. Don't think I've seen you smoke a cigar on stream. Oh, I don't remember. Jeremy says, Rob, a one-sided binocular is a monocular. Just saying. Oh, well, that sounds like it might be useful. Kincaid says, politics, tools for controlling thought, action, and organization of sometimes unwilling cash cows. Nice little productivity machines that just produce something that you can tax, just like cows. You know, a cow, you just fatten up, you just feed them a bunch of stuff, and they just pump out a bunch of milk. It's kind of how the American public is. You just give them a bunch of sports and Netflix, and every 4 years you say, you get to come and participate in America. Go vote in an election where it counts. And everybody goes, well, that sounds pretty reasonable. I'm pretty much free. Life's pretty good. Just locked down here and can't go to work unless I shove something into my body, but that's not a big deal. Everyone else is doing it, so whatever. And that, my friends, was it for Joe Biden's speech on January 6th. Let's change gears now. Kamala Harris also gave a speech on January 6th. She actually spoke before Joe Biden, and here's what she had to say. She's doing the same assault on democracy thing, and she's really bad at speaking in public. So let's listen to her.
Let's listen to the Vice President.
Certain dates echo throughout history, including dates that instantly remind all who have lived through them where they were and what they were doing when our democracy came under assault. Dates that occupy...
All right, so it's the same thing, right? It's the assault on democracy. We're still trying to glean out what the specific conduct is. We went through a list during Joe Biden's speech, trying to identify what she's so upset about. Don't need to spend a lot of time on that again. Here is now Kamala Harris carrying on.
Not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941.
What date is that?
September 11th, 2001.
What date is that?
And January 6th, 2021.
Oh, great.
On that day.
Yeah, tell us. So we've got the comparisons coming back, so we're going to have to bring the chart out again. The Hyperbole Tracker, she gave us the date, folks. That was Pearl Harbor, 1941. Uh-oh. We've got 9/11, which, of course, took place on 9/11. And then we've got January 6th. Now, we're going to have to compare and contrast these things. We picked this back up with Joe Biden. Let's see how Kamala keeps going. Now, pay close attention, because Kamala, when she gets a little bit off track when she's speaking publicly, you can sort of hear her speech. I listened to a lot of this today. She kind of will go into this really kind of cadence. It's very formulaic. It's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You'll see it. And then when she gets a little bit off track, when the teleprompter goes a little bit too fast or too slow, she panics a little bit. And you're going to watch her hands come in underneath her. She's been getting training. She's been getting better at this because she wants to run for president and try to lead people one day, but it's not going to work. But so she brings her hands together like this, and then she starts doing the Flappy Bird. Watch the Flappy Bird come. So, you know, people have these quirks. I have them, right? You watch the show. You're like, why does he do that? That's weird. But you just notice these things, and you watch them as they change. You watch as people progress. My mannerisms, my quirks, my weird things. You know, I should be trying to work those out so I'm a better speaker like that and presenter. And you can watch her, and we're going to continue to watch her as this evolves over the next little bit. So here's Kamala Harris. Get ready for Flappy Bird.
I was not only Vice President-elect, I was also a United States Senator. And I was here at the Capitol that morning at a classified hearing with fellow members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Hours later, the gates of the Capitol were breached. I had left, but my thoughts immediately turned not only to my colleagues, but to my staff, who had been forced to seek refuge in our office, converting filing cabinets into barricades.
Oh, we didn't get Flappy Bird on that one. It might be the next clip. I thought it was the Flappy Bird, but let's go back to the Hyperbole Tracker. And so you can see now we've got another area where January 6th was basically worse than Pearl Harbor. I mean, at Pearl Harbor, nobody barricaded themselves into rooms with filing cabinets, okay? They were out there, they were working, and they just got bombed by the Japanese, right? Nobody was bracing themselves about somebody coming in the front door, but on January 6th they were. Also guessing that didn't happen on 9/11. Might have happened in the Civil War, but I'm not sure if they had filing cabinets back in the Civil War. So actually, you know, that could be an X, give or take, whatever you want to call it. So it's looking pretty bad, folks. You can see here we've got just an entire column of green check boxes. So here is what Kamala talks about next. This might be the Flappy Bird. I'm not sure where that one went, but here is where she's using very specific language about what took place on January 6th. And she's using language like, you know, this is a recurring issue here. And back when this issue was first bubbling up in America, there were a lot of people who marched. There were a lot of people who picketed to stop this type of conduct from happening, hearkening America back to a certain era in American history. Okay, she's not going to say that, you know, democracy is valued because troops went and died overseas. That's not the era she's talking about. That you know, Americans sacrificed themselves in some other way. She's one era, picketing and marching and shedding blood. Because as we know, this insurrection was filled with a bunch of racists like Donald Trump. Here is Kamala.
What the extremists who roamed these halls targeted was not only the lives of elected leaders. What they sought to degrade and destroy was not only a building, hallowed as it is. What they were assaulting were the institutions, the values, the ideals that generations of Americans have marched, picketed, and shed blood to establish and defend.
Okay, so you see how she's speaking. When she talks, it's one word or phrase at a time. If you were delivering a speech like this in your high school, you would get a D. And she is the vice president. Okay, so it's not really meaningful, but what you can see here is she's really being aggressive, and Joe Biden was also very aggressive, going after a lot of the political opponents. And there's a great comment here from Operation Reciprocity. Pull this one up on the screen. And let me fix this real quickly here, get this reoriented there. So this comment comes in and says, I wonder if Democrats in their relentless race to push America off a cliff realize that by pushing people so hard, they may be inevitably be producing the next Nicholas or McVeigh. And I think that's a very, you know, it's a very spicy comment there, because you don't want to be saying that, look what you're causing. You know, that sort of implies that maybe it's like you want that to happen. Of course, nobody does. But I think that there's a good argument here that they would be sort of okay with something that direction happening. You know, they want, there's a whole belief here that there's an accelerationist movement, right? That the only way that you're going to see meaningful change in this country is when something big happens. And so the idea is you poke the bear, right? You really rile up the other side. It's not about healing. It's not about prosecuting people who did something bad on January 6th and just being done with it. That's it. If that was it, we'd be done with this already. Not even close, right? That's not what this is about. This is about gaining a political foothold, using a very captive audience and using a very powerful political tool to your benefit. And if you continue to do that and you continue to villainize people, you're necessarily going to cause, you're driving a wedge And when a wedge happens and something bad happens, like what happened on January 6th, you get a lot of people clamoring for more power. You get a lot of opportunity to gobble things up. Look what they did with the pandemic. It's going to be the same thing here. So if something does happen, yeah, if there's a McVeigh, if there's a Nichols, if something happens, they're going to say, see, we told you. We've been screaming about this domestic terrorism, about these domestic violent extremists, these DVEs for the last 18 months. Look what happened. We told you so. That's why we need this new domestic terror surveillance bill. That's why we need to make sure that everybody has a digital ID or whatever's coming. I mean, it's coming. So just get ready for that. That's from Operation Reciprocity. I think it's a very, very astute observation. And I think it's kind of what they're trying to do. You know, if they were really about healing and unity, they wouldn't need to come out and dig like that. All right, let's see what else we've got. So that was Kamala Harris. So marched, picketed, you know, hearkening back to a bygone era. She's prefacing what she is going to talk about next. Here she's talking about all the scenes that they saw. Let's listen into Kamala.
On January 6th,
get ready.
We all saw what our nation would look like if the forces who seek
there it is.
To dismantle our democracy are successful. The lawlessness, the violence, the chaos. What was at stake then?
All right, so we all saw the scenes, she says. We did. We saw them, and they were pretty bad. You know, everybody had a Trump flag, a lot of red everywhere, very conveniently all over the place. Trump, 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 all over the place. Very beautiful. Now, she said how horrific it was. Now, of course, we know from Kamala Harris that she's kind of okay with some violence. I mean, in fact, she's even okay funding some of it, helping people generate enough money to post bond so that the people who were arrested for committing the violence can get back out and presumably go do it again. So she's okay with some violence. And the scenes at the Capitol really disturbed her, but not these types of scenes. This was back in Minneapolis on May 28th, 3 days before she posted to help these people post bond. So pawn shop just burning to the ground right around the corner from the 3rd precinct. I mean, it's not funny. It's horrible. All right, so there was that going on. I mean, for weeks all over the country. Didn't hear a peep from Kamala other than if you want to donate to support those people's bonds so they can get out and continue to do that. Well, here's a link because she was running for office. Because she needed that contingent. She needed people back then who were outraged at Donald Trump to turn this into something and use it as a political tool. And she did it effectively. She's the vice president. It worked. So here you can see now she's going to tell us about, you know, this resurgent force of racism that harkens back to that era of picketing and marching and shedding blood. Here's Kamala.
Overturning our votes and peddling lies and misinformation by some radical faction that may be newly resurgent,
ooh,
but whose roots run old and deep.
All right, so this newly resurgent force that's coming out and taking over everything. Well, sounds like she's talking about racist white guys, which is, of course, going to be added to our Hyperbole Tracker. So it's looking like January 6th also has racist white guys in the category. We know that the Civil War had racist white guys. And so we're sort of, we're trying to compare and contrast. Is January 6th worse than the Civil War? And it's looking right now, I mean, that all that madness was done in 3 hours, very high ROI in terms of violence to damage. We also see that we're basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 for 6. On the green checks. And so that is, we're in the lead now. January 6th is way worse than the Civil War, obviously. So here is Kamala Harris. Now, I think this might be wrapping up. Let's see what she's got for us.
When I meet with young people, they often ask about the state of our democracy, about January 6th.
Oh, really?
And what I tell them is January 6th reflects the dual nature of democracy.
Look at her.
Its fragility
She's smiling.
And its strength.
She's like laughing.
You see, the strength of democracy is the rule of law.
She loves
it. The strength of democracy is the principle that everyone should be treated equally. That elections should be free and fair. That corruption should be given no quarter. The strength of democracy is that it empowers the people.
So they're saying nothing right now. The real crux of all of this was that they want to pass this new voting bill, and they're going to really push hard on that. I think that's tomorrow. It's sort of a parallel thing. So you can follow the logic. January 6th was an attack on American democracy. They needed to use this to their advantage. One of the most strongest advantages immediately was to demonize the entire oppositional political party, including Donald Trump. Republicans and Democrats unified. The Uniparty does not want him back. They'll sideline him and use it to that effect. Try impeachment, try that, doesn't work out. Trump's exonerated again. So they go a different route now. Now they're trying the select committee. This is going to be something that is done by legislative fiat that will preclude Trump and sideline him there. But she just continues on. She says, our hearts go out to a lost loved one.
The National Guard and other law enforcement officers who answered the call that day, including those who later succumbed to wounds, both visible and invisible.
Physical.
Our thoughts are with all of the families who have lost a loved one.
Physical and invisible is what she said. So the people who died from their wounds, which were, I think, Trumpers, but not sure. But she said that her hearts go out to everybody who lost somebody. So presumably she's also talking about Ashley Babbitt, right? Because she was shot and killed in this ordeal. She was unarmed. And so we can add that to the list here. We have unarmed people being executed. I think that's across the board. So we're going to give that to the Civil War, Pearl Harbor. We're also going to give that to 9/11. So we'll give that to 1/6. Ashley Babbitt, of course, was shot and killed, unarmed and shot. So I think that was that's 7 for 7 now on the list here. So it's looking like 1/6 is still in the lead. Now, there was something interesting about what Kamala said, right? The physical and the invisible. There was a very interesting cluster of activity that happened, very tragically. 4 officers who responded to the Capitol attack died by suicide. This was posted back on August 2nd by Reuters, several months, or basically 9 months after the event. 4 known suicides. We've talked about this many times on this channel. What happened here? Why did this little cluster happen? Okay, suicide clusters are not an unknown thing. This happens. Gunther Hashida. Several others passed away. Kyle DeFreytag and others. Some have been with the department for years. So why did that? Why did that little cluster happen? Don't know. Not an expert on suicide clusters, but I'd love to talk to one if there is somebody who has done an analysis on that. What happened there? Here's Kamala now. Let's wrap this up.
We must also do something more.
We must also do something more.
We cannot sit on the sidelines. We must unite in defense of our democracy in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility.
There it is again.
Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our prosperity.
She says absolutely nothing not applicable, says all this January stuff is the baby logic of 2020, which I think is very accurate. Kamala Harris not saying anything, just opines, talks about democracy and the benefits of liberty and all this stuff. Nothing there as usual. And so every one of these things, of course, always requires more, as she just said. It requires more for us. So we're going to have to, just give up a bunch of stuff because it demands it of us. And so we see the feds have been encroaching all over the place. They want to take over, voting more thoroughly now. They want the filibuster gone. They want rampant control. And so, folks, look, you can't even argue with the data. Okay, Monster One, and those of you out there that are like, this is ridiculous. January 6th is not that big of a deal. The data is in. It's right here. It's 8 for 8. Green check marks. The whole thing took 3 hours, which is ultra efficient. And it's not even up for debate. January 6th was worse than the Civil War, was worse than Pearl Harbor, and was worse than 9/11. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden said so, and there's the data that is supported. So, I mean, look, that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. So, let's see what else is going on over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Midland is here. Midland Productions is here. Let's see if I can find this one. Says, anyone else getting President Snow vibes? Who's President Snow? I'm not sure who that one would be. President Snow vibes. Like Jon Snow? Maybe him. I'm not sure. Let's see what else we've got over from Locals. A couple more questions here. Vientica says, do you think that if Kamala's character was more tolerable, that her voice would be as well? I don't have a particular problem with her voice, I don't think. Like if she spoke normally, like a normal human, I don't know that the voice itself would be the problem. It's how she uses it, like it's how she uses her vocal cords. That's what you're hearing that's so problematic. It's the twinge. It's like she squeezes them. It's not natural. She's not talking naturally. It's why it sounds so weird. You can feel it. You can sense it. It doesn't sound right. Sergeant Bob said the prior one was from me. Let's see which one was that? Oh, that was a Kamala. No, this one was from Sergeant. It says assault on democracy. It was really a mostly peaceful protest without burning buildings. We have been to Pearl Harbor Memorial. We spent 2 days there. This was no Pearl Harbor. I agree with you on that one, Sergeant Bob. Obviously, I'm being facetious when I'm showing the chart. Kamala trying to do a bad version of Shatner, which I don't even know how that's possible. That's from Vienticus. Grouchy old cat lady says, so much for bringing the country together. This just might backfire on them. I think they want that to happen. Monster One says, I wonder what the classified meeting was about. Couldn't possibly been about how they were about to stage a fake insurrection, was it? Monster One. Kincaid says, okay, hands down, she wins something. I don't know of anyone so robotic, devoid of real emotion. Seriously, simply awful. She could read those on a crashing plane to a numbed Lowell, dreaming of the terror below. From Kincaid. Ladybug says, what your thoughts on Kamala's leaving before Biden did his speech? Oh, I didn't see that. Seems like she was in a hurry to get out of there, wondering where she had to be. I didn't see that. She didn't stick around, huh? I was so brain damaged after listening to her this morning, I couldn't even see straight. I had to sit down for an hour and do some, box breathing. It was a lot of work for me. But I don't think so. I think that she wants to distance herself from this administration because it is a terrible administration and she wants to run for office again. So she doesn't want to be seen in the same room as him. Monster One says she's got a lot of nerve talking about violence. Someone remind this woman that she funded violence, as we just talked about. We have another one from Sergeant Bob says lawlessness, violence, chaos. Sounds like the Capitol Police tactical plan. Hey, yo, from Sergeant Bob. We have another one from former LEO. Haven't seen you in a while. Welcome, Sergeant. Says, what happened to POTUS Trump request for the National Guard on January 5th? It's a great question. There was a letter from Muriel Bowser saying, don't you dare send anybody over here. We don't need their help. We don't want them here. And we see what happened. Kincaid says that hiccup you noticed, I think was her choking down a laugh. Phew, 70s dance lesson for the win. C-Rose says, hey, Rob, I think you're the first person in history to say, let's listen to Kamala Harris. Congratulations. What do I win? Like a life imprisonment for forcing that to happen? You get a penalty. It's like, you're not allowed to do that in this society there, buddy. You're in timeout for that. Let's listen to Kamala Harris. You remember that movie Demolition Man when Sylvester Stallone says a bad word and the thing buzzes? We should have one of those for Kamala. She opens her, Zir! You've been fined 1 violation of speaking as Kamala Harris. All right, society would be a better place. Monster One says, someone remind her the Confederates were Democrats. Jim Crow was a Democrat. Hunter Biden says, you missed one thing on your checklist. You forgot to add if my crack pipe came up missing. Have you seen my crack pipe? It's from Hunter Biden. I haven't seen it, Hunter. Haven't been looking for it, but if it turns up, I'll see if I can FedEx it to you. I'll just call the FBI. They'll bring it back to you. Monster One says, so you're saying they want to protect democracy by passing unconstitutional voting laws. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they want to wreck America by protecting America or something. Vantika says, this strategy that seems to be prevalent of having crime and destruction run rampant makes me think of a quote from JFK. Those who foolishly sought power riding the back of the tiger ended up inside. It's a good quote. I like that one. Ghost Gunner says, Kamala is so incredibly terrible. I legit think she is an evil person. I live just outside Minneapolis, and I remember I couldn't stop watching the live streams of the riots. It was mesmerizing. I couldn't turn it off as it was so close to home. The violent crimes there have gone up dramatically. There are hardly any police officers, and there were just shy of 100 murders. Who knows how many shootings and over 2,000 carjackings. It's insane there now. Yeah, and like, look around what's going on in California. Do you know where Kamala came from? California. It's a dump there. Sorry, former LEO, but it's true. You have to recognize. Get out of there. Leafy Bug says, translated Kamala. When I meet with child actors on one of the many hapless publicity stunts, they ask me their scripted questions. I give them my scripted answers, and they pretend I'm saying something insightful and fascinating. I feel so ready to be the president. Getting really good at LARPing, live action role playing, faking, make believing to be the president, going out there and reading a speech from a teleprompter and talking to kids in America. Protecting liberty. That's amazing. We have Kincaid says, when she meets young people like in a cabin, Baby Yaga, if we can't make light during dark times, we'll freeze in fear. I don't know what that one is. Thank you for sending that, Kincaid. Let's see what else we've got. We have Monster One says, President Snow was the woman in the Hunger Games that overthrew the government. It's an apt comparison because they are trying to overthrow right now with this voting bill. I think I saw one of those movies. That's with that one actress. That one. Sergeant Bob says, for Leafy Bug, Kay had to get back to the border. Kamala was running back there to not solve that problem either. See, the Veil is here. Long time no see. Says, Rob, the VP mentioned free and fair elections. Have to tear this apart here. If we are talking about free elections, then does this not mean all promotions of the election means that the news media does not get paid and there are no election harvesters? No lobbying, as the lobbyists do not get paid? The papers and pamphlets and letters are free as well? This is what free means. Nothing gets paid for. It's all free. Jeez, can I get a free car that actually works out of this? I can use a free car. Who couldn't? Now, when we were talking about fair, well, if the elections were fair, then Bernie would have been on the final stage for president, not Biden. But we can only say fair elections, then there wouldn't be rules to segregate the Republican, Democratic voting districts or the Green Party and Libertarian and Independent voting districts. They would just be clumped together. So when the VP says fair elections, it's only fair if they draw the lines and they make the rules. If I made the rules, then the Cubs baseball team would be the idols of the nation, as they would win the World Series for 10 years in a row. Yeah, if you get to make the rules of the game, then you can make sure that you continue to win the game. Pretty obvious. Three Girly says Snow Vibes is in reference to the despot in the Hunger Games movie and the prequel to the Hunger Games books. Ballad If Songbirds and Snakes is a really good book too. I haven't seen any. I mean, I think I saw part of the first one. I kind of like those dystopian movies. I don't know why I haven't seen those. Leafy Bug says their claimed, quote, assault on democracy is vastly overshadowed by their insult to our intelligence with all of the garbage they're saying that they think we're going to believe. That's from Leafy Bug. And we have a few more. Former LEO says it would have been better if the great unifier mush-brained Biden spoke of his accomplishments this year and not attack the prior administration. What a fool. Everybody knows he's not competent. I think you're right about that. Monster One says Demolition Man was the most accurate future movie ever. It had social distancing, self-driving cars, defunded police, thought police with ticket dispensers, non-binary people, people living underground because they don't want to comply. That's very true, Monster One. I didn't even think about that when I brought up that example, but it's true. And Taco Bell's still around too, and it's pretty sounds like it's still delicious. So that's good. All right. And so that, my friends, is it for us for the show for the day. Let me check back in over on YouTube and see if we had any additional messages to get to, but it looks like we're all caught up. And so thank you, everybody, for being here. I want to welcome some people over to the community. Before we get out of here, as usual, big welcomes to Lena. We've got Piper, Todd Hupp, Suspicious Chick. We've got Ozzy Lawyer, Green Tutka, S. Baker, Gotcha Good, Jim 2008, Falcone, USNY. Yeah, well, Reen is here, not RWNYC. Chuck David, Mark on W. Shindog is here, Nosy, Texas Rosie, Taz Mom, and Cookie Monster 2. Come on over and join us at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. It should be .fun because it really is a lot of fun over there. And so we did a live stream yesterday, probably get one in tomorrow over there because we've got a lot more to talk about. And I hope you join us on the journey. And that, my friends, is it for us for the day. Thank you for being a part of the program. I'll see you right back here tomorrow, 3 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Mountain, 5 p.m. in Texas, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody else, have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.